Dice are rolling, darkness falls. Inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Why, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the side question episode of Inside the GM Studio, where we field questions from the internet on an alternating basis week to week. I am your host, David.
I'm Matt.
Whoa, kind of gravelly, all Tom Waitsy tonight, huh?
I try.
Yeah. All right, well, I got the die here. I'm going to give it a click-clack and see what Matt comes up with. I get a 9 this week.
All right.
What does the
9?
magic chart tell us is a 9?
We go back to the realms of Reddit with, let's see, this one comes from Alvar Sarani on our Ask Game Masters with the title, Helping the Players to Be More Proactive and More Narrative.
Okay.
I GM for a party of 3.
There we go.
All 3 are not yet used to proactive playing. One of them is generally clueless about what to do in a scene and needs constant reassuring and explanation. The other is a bit hung up on this idea that each encounter is a sort of riddle with only one correct solution, and this solution needs to be reached by her character saying the exact correct words. So no summary and a roll. I try to convince this NPC with my charm and roll for persuasion. And the third mostly resorts to automatic fire. I would like them to be more active in imagining the scene, figuring out a reasonable course of action and getting on with it. Encouraging them thus far hasn't really helped. They seem locked in this idea that I am constantly setting a secret trap for them that they will walk into, and if they don't do the exact right thing, this seems to be enlarged when I wait or ask for them to make a proactive move. How to deal with players who are reactive and suspicious.
Yeah, I would like a little more context to how long this has been going on.
Yeah, it doesn't say really. It sounds very recent and like it hasn't been going on for very long.
Right, but are they level 1, 2, 3, 5, 7?
Yeah,
we
don't know.
Because to me, the instinct is in the interest of giving your players what they want, then you really shouldn't be encouraging them to do what you want. If they think that there's hidden whatever and you've tried to nudge them in a different direction and they're not having it, then just start making there be some hidden whatever, right? Like, and then they'll have something to latch onto. And that would be kind of delivering on their expectations. It seems like the 3 players have kind of the same problem of different flavors. One of them, he said, is just kind of like a smash stuff up and ask questions later. One of them is there's one key to this lock and I need to find the proper key. And then the other one is, golly gee shucks, I don't know what everybody else wants, I guess is fine, kind of.
Pretty much. Oh, no, wait.
Yeah.
Well, then, the other one is that each encounter is some sort of riddle where there's only one correct solution. The other person, what was it?
The first person.
That was the first person. The other one needs to end this solution. Oh, no, that is the same thing. And then the other one,
to me,
resorts to automatic fire. Yeah, you were right.
Yeah. So it's like you have the second person is like, I need to figure out what this riddle is, and the one key to one lock kind of thing. The first one seems like they're just not confident in like knowing what to do. and the third one is more of a murder hobo. And so that, just like most things, if you don't want a certain behavior, rather than sitting around and twiddling your thumbs, hoping the players will latch on to what it is you would like to see, the better course of action is just to consequence the behavior that is the behavior you don't want to see. So if one character is being very brazen and just smashing up bad guys at the drop of a hat, you need to throw challenges in there that really de-incentivize that. You need to have the, generally speaking, if there's one character that's being hyper aggressive, then think tactically. Don't go, okay, all the monsters are just going to see this guy as the big threat, and they're all going to gang up on him, and they're going to kick the shit out of him, and he's probably going to get fucked up. But he'll stop doing that after a few times of, usually very few times. From my experience, a player needs to be like shown the way. They'll just be cautious, sometimes almost overly cautious. Sometimes it's like players will have something go bad by total circumstance, by total coincidence. It'll just go wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. It's just a coincidence that sometimes things just don't work out the way you want them to. And they'll take that as some sort of message where it's like the next one instance of it, and like the next time they're like, oh no, I'm not going up to the door. I'm gonna stay back. I go crouch down behind a rock, and I like get my crossbow out, and I like aim it like just so I have 3/4 cover. And you're just like, wow, that was like just one time where you got kind of fucked up, because it goes that way sometimes, and suddenly you're super duper gun shy. Like, the problem of a character always feeling like there's some sort of secret mystery or some encounter that needs to be unlocked. The way to do that is to have the encounter go fine with different tactics, and then maybe they might loosen up, but maybe you could make there be a little bit of there. It depends on whether you want to give them that as a way to go, like, it's fine that the PCs are behaving in this way if that's the way they want to engage. I gotta really push back that I feel like two of the players are not really being reactive. The first player is being reactive, waiting for stuff to happen, unsure of how to like engage. But the other players are being proactive. They're just not being proactive in the way that this particular GM wants. And he's not illuminating the ways in which these particular behaviors are a problem. So it's kind of hard to suss out what he would like to see instead. I don't know. Is that your read on it? Because I don't feel like two of the three players are being reactive. They are being proactive. They're just being proactive in a way that is like, I'm gonna kill everything, or like,
Right.
oh, there's a puzzle and I need to solve it. That is taking on some agency there.
So this guy, this Ulvar Sarani, they seem to be like the GM after my own heart, asking for something like this, because I feel the solution to this, what they really want, because they put in here, I would like them to be more active in imagining the scenes, figuring out reasonable course of actions, yada yada yada. And this is, I think the answer to all this is what you and I do quite a bit, and we talk about on the show quite a bit, is bring the players into actually creating the scenery and like almost helping flesh out the world a little bit more, because that is like training wheels for later on. I was looking at some of the other things that the original poster was saying to some comments there, and they're saying that they want them to describe what the execution of their roles are like in the scene and all that. And with this sort of training wheels, them being able to say that, oh, I'm allowed to say something, because I feel this way with a lot of new role players. At least this was back in the day. I know that they felt like if the DM didn't say it happened, then you couldn't do anything. Like, they were God. What they said went, and we weren't allowed to make up our own shit at all. I know it's changing a lot these days, but I still think there's still like this stigma of new players, which sounds like these people might be a little bit new, that they don't feel they have the right to be as creative as some GMs want them to be. So if you use that training wheels of helping them as the GM, you initiate it and you have characters help build out and flesh out the world a little bit more. It gives them agency to be able to maybe speak up a little bit more, even in combat. At least that's what my answer would be for something like this. Instead of them thinking that no matter what, it's always going to be a trap or shoot first, we'll talk about it later. And even here, one of the first commenter on here, your GM Chandler, he just says, "Why reward their suspicion with traps and TPKs?" Of course.
Yeah. But like the problem is if I understand correctly for the second player in question, the issue is that she believes that there's only one correct
Right.
way
Yep.
to do things. And so it's a sticky wicket to deal with because the one player's solution to dealing with everything is just unbridled violence, and the other player doesn't seem like they really want to make any decisions. Typically, the way you would show this would typically the way you would disavow that second player of that notion is to just show that other solutions can work. But if there are no other solutions being proffered, then that's a problem. So it's really not a problem of the lack of proactive, uh, proactive role playing. It's a problem of the dynamic between the players. You have one incredibly passive player, one player that thinks in a very narrow band, and another player that thinks in a very narrow band of one particular flavor. That whatever killing bad guys is the solution to everything. I'm gonna guess he's a barbarian or a fighter or something like that. So that's a tough nut to crack. You could choose to see it as that mystery of everything is just kind of what they want, or they just want to like crush bad guys or go along. There's probably some tactics you can do to get the first player, the more passive one, to come out of their shell a little bit. That could change the dynamic greatly if you just give them confidence to act in a way that's contrary to the other players, show it working, and then that could change the balance. But it's really hard to get players like that to come out of their shell. You usually have to like kind of latch onto them and whatever, like specifically kind of tease them out and be like, okay, like what are you doing? Like, well, I mean, just like whatever anybody else. No, no, no. I didn't ask what everybody else was doing. I'm asking what you're doing here and now. Like, and then just you can and probably should punish passivity. I'm much more likely to punish the first player than the second or third player. Like to just punish them. Like I know I always say like I try not to punish players. I just show them the available consequences, but I really don't like indecisive players. I really don't like indecisive whatever because it's a collaborative storytelling effort, and if you're this is not a passive media experience, right? Like decide what it is that you want to do. It's usually a byproduct of agreeability. They just kind of want to go along with the story and let the other players all make the decisions. What you need to do is force them into a scenario where they have to be the one that makes the decision to do something. That's not easy to do, but it could tip the dynamic of the party pretty easily if done properly.
What do you think of offering benefits? Like when in fourth edition, when I had, if you did a check on a monster to find its weaknesses or just knowledge check of the monster, if you got 3 of those in a row, 3 successful ones in a row, I gave you a +1 to damage and attack. Do you think something like that might help with a group like this? If you gave like some sort of benefit, if you worked a little bit harder instead of just giving pressure, like, listen, I will reward you with something.
Yeah, it's a sticky wicket. I think me well enough to know that I'm not a big fan of like meta rewards for things that should be boilerplate role playing advantages.
Mhm.
I prefer to handle those things narratively, because the more you gamify what constitutes good role playing, the more you kind of neuter that complete aspect of the game. I suspect that some of these things, combat's such a big bright spotlight in D&D that using the using the mechanisms by which you make combat successful, in other aspects, I'm not really a fan of. I like to kind of keep exploration, role playing, and combat kind of like separate silos. And so giving either of those other two pillars the trappings of combat mechanics, it seems like you're trying to apply the same metrics to all aspects of the game when really D&D is a variety of different games within one, right? Which is part of the reason, at least I think, that it's fun. So, but for a group like this, it might be a way to do it, but at the same time, it's like then now you're kind of tweaking with meta mechanics, and players can and will just leverage them and gamify them, and it will live beyond the scope of getting the behavior that you want to the point where the players will just be leveraging it for mechanical benefits instead of just seeing the narrative and character benefits, which are more soft benefits, but can be much more powerful, because they're within the context and they're more situational. The second you give a name and a mechanic to a particular narratively driven thing, the players, whether they're conscious of it or not, begin to kind of mine for that. And then after, it might serve a particularly good purpose, like initially, but then once it becomes routine, now it's just a mechanic to be mined. And
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of that. So.
What do you think of this? I kind of dig this. I've never thought of this as a great idea. This is for you guys out there. This is free. I don't expect anything in return. You can have this one. But there was a commenter, a vinegar taster, wrote, I think it might be time for an adventure in town. Get them to a moderately sized town, tell them that they are exhausted, and then ask them what they do. Get them to solve the find the inn problem, and then the have dinner, and the find the general store and buy equipment, and make each low stakes encounter that gets genuine detail. Ask a lot of describe what your character looks like and what is your character going to do next questions. Get them to do the normal, bland, everyday stuff. Don't let them skip anything, but there is really no chance of failure. This will give them a little breathing room and it will feel safe. Really dig into the town, make it come alive, and don't rush through it. No thieves, no assassination plots, no attacks on the town, no plot hooks, just daily life. Commoners doing their best and merchants making deals. I think that's kind of a cool idea. It's it's a
Yeah,
nice palate cleanser.
it might be appropriate for this particular circumstance because the issue is that the PCs are grappling with the fact that they all feel like the stakes are so high and they
Yeah.
have different tools at their disposal. So lowering the stakes might be good. I don't know that I would necessarily be a fan of not having anything that resembles conflict or narrative, just because that can get kind of boring. But you can hand over agency to the players and force them, or not force them, but just like make them aware, like you have to like say what it is you're doing and you have to take some agency, and without some sort of like strict conflict in front of them to deal with, a problem to be solved with violence or puzzle solving or deferring to your party mates, then it could build that muscle a little bit for the future. So, but I would say you might want to still try to incorporate some things that are narrative driven, that are just low stakes enough to give the players a sense of direction and purpose, but not necessarily with huge consequences. I always think of like the old, lots of like old RPGs, or especially if they're more cutesy RPGs. Like initially, you're kind of like milling around town, and the stakes are pretty low. So it might just be like, you know, somebody in town doesn't have any apricots to bake their pie, and like there are some apricots in the orchard just outside of town, but like, I just don't have the time to like go do it. And then it's like, oh, like okay, like I can go and get the apricots, and it could be kind of a fun little narrative scene with description or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe it's mysterious, but not necessarily like spooky or violent. But they go and they get the apricots and they bring it back, and then they get a little pie for a reward,
Yeah.
right? And the pie is like, you know, good for whatever, stuff like
Yeah.
that, where somebody's wagon wheel is broken or whatever in town, just these real small
Yeah.
stakes
There you go. I like
kind of
that.
things that are like, especially because it does a lot in any given environment to help build the characters' reputations, right? You can kind of see how they interact, and they can, they're not always trying to get like or solve a problem that's like part of the overarching narrative so much as it's just, like this kind of bridge chapter. That's a good idea, but like I said, I probably would tweak it a little bit to ensure that there is still some narrative thrust. I don't Players that aren't used to taking agency over their characters and what they do, or they have one particular tactic that they always do. It's violence, it's puzzle solving, it's skullduggery, it's whatever. The way to disavow that of them is not to just throw them in the deep end of the pool with
Mm.
total autonomy, because they will probably just tread water a whole bunch. You can give them a little bit, but the idea of lowering the stakes substantially, and giving the players more agency in a scenario that feels a little less dire and a little more safe is probably an overall good tactic.
So the original poster put up a follow up saying what they're going to do for their next session to try to change this. So this is what I will try next session. I start the session off by asking, what do you want your character to achieve slash complete this session? I'll use quick encounters more. We play Savage Worlds. Quick encounters break scenes slash actions that can be played turn by turn into tasks slash parts with logical or chronological connections. It turns down the resolution of actions into a few dice rolls. For each task, I'll ask the players before the roll to describe, what if you fail horribly? What happens if your success is spectacular? This should help with the requirement to instantly describe a success or fail as soon as the dice stop rolling. That way, I hope to ease them into the proactive and narrative aspect more.
Yeah, because he's trying to get a little more flavor out of things, right? And it's good to nudge your players in that direction, but also, like I said, there's always a caution here, which is, as a GM, sometimes you have in your head the sort of game that you want to run and what would be cool. And unless you're certain your players share that entirely, then you need to be giving them some of what they want. And when you should be giving them something that they don't proclaim to want, it should be because it's something unexpected, some sort of challenge they haven't foreseen, trying to anticipate things that they want that they don't know they want or they haven't said that they want. And that might not be in line with what it is you want to run. So often it's you have to kind of give up on the idea that you're going to have a certain style of game if your players' sensibilities are too far off base from that. So if your players are behaving in a certain way, then you should take that as an indicator of the things that they're interested in. The character that's paranoid, that like there's all sorts of like whatever, is probably the kind of player that likes kind of like layered secrets and things like
Yeah.
that. So you can simultaneously reward that to some degree and try to disavow them of the fact that it's there around every corner. And frankly, if you give it to them sometimes, they'll probably chill the fuck out on like thinking it's there every time,
Yes.
right? And
Yep.
so, but that's a delicate balance because again, you're subtextually communicating to the players what it is you want to see. So you have to like when there is some there, you have to have up to the point there's 10 encounters, and one encounter is a real layered, mysterious thing, a nut to be cracked. And when the player that wants to latch onto that gets to that, then the other 9 encounters should be disavowing them of the notion that it is every encounter.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So they should be able to delineate when a certain particular tact is relevant. This is the tricky thing about DMing, because what makes a good player, and in a lot of ways what makes a good GM that communicates to the players, is trying to sharpen the character's judgment, right? And that's no easy thing to do subtextually without being like overt about it. But sometimes brazen hostility is the correct path forward, right? Kick down the door, fuck up the bad guys, abscond with the princess. Sometimes diplomacy, sometimes stealth, sometimes role playing and trickery and bargaining and whatever else. And for each encounter, for the players to know, all right, what's the better tactic here? Do our skills align with that? Like, if our skills don't align with that, what's a better secondary tactic? Maybe the best tactic here is to try to sweet talk somebody. But, we're like a barbarian, a fighter, and like a half orc fucking cleric, right? Like, we have no social skills in this party. And so, all right, so how do we go about getting the same result? And when you communicate to the players that there are a suite of options available, and they can delineate what might be the best option available, compare it to their available skills, and if they go, well, I have something for this, right? What's the best way to get through a door? Well, to open it, but if the door's locked, what's the second best way to get through the door? Well, if it's locked, it probably will be to have the key. Okay, do we have a way of knowing where the key is? Can we find the key? No? Okay, what's the third best option? Maybe to pick the lock. Do we have anybody in the group that knows how to pick locks? No, we're all a bunch of like sausage finger fucking like burly idiots. All right, I guess we got to kick the door down.
Yeah, who's
right?
got the
Like,
heaviest boot?
Right. And so it's like, but that's a last resort. But you want them going through that suite of options available to them. Because I can't count how many times a player is like, ooh, a lock? I'm good at picking locks. I'm going to open the lock. And someone's like, no, the key's on the bad guy that we just killed. We have the key. It's right here. Oh, but like, I'm so good at picking locks. I'm going to pick the lock. I'm going to open it immediately. It's like, yeah, but we don't need to do that. We got the key. Like, we could just open it here. Check
It's
it
like
out.
our game
Like,
last night. I did that. I didn't even mean to do it. It just kind of happened that we had just taken down the boss, and there was a locked door that we had to get through. And I was like, Patrick, he's our rogue. Go in there and if you could, please use your expertise to open up that door for us. And he's just like, I'm gonna just search him real quick. Yep, key. Don't worry about it. Like,
yeah.
oh yeah.
Right. But that judgment of going, what is the best option forward? What are the skills that are available at our disposal? Like, that would maybe solve that problem. And then, do we need to move down the hierarchy? If you can see your players kind of processing that with each interaction, then you're doing a really good job of like communicating a variety of options. It'll disavow that second player of thinking that like there's one way, but then occasionally the way that they like are going to do the kind of peeling away the layers of the onion to solve the one particular way, if it's rewarded occasionally, like you should like players like that are always trying to figure out like to kind of break the system. Like, what's the best way to do this? But that needs to be tempered with some sense of urgency, because otherwise players will spin their wheels trying to figure something out. Well, hang on, let's think about this for a second. Like, we could just go in here and like, move to the corners and hide, and then tactically move around and surround the bad guy. But what if we did this instead? And you're just like, dude, this is a good plan. Like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good, right? And if it works, it works. And so, you need to kind of have it's difficult because you have to have a strong sense of what logically tracks. Sometimes what logically tracks ends up with high tension encounters end up being just kind of flat because you're just following the chain of events logically. The players are particularly crafty or clever, or maybe they just get fucking lucky. They just get lucky with positioning and initiative order or something. But over the long arc, I promise you that if like you're thoughtful about the logic of what the characters would be doing in a living environment, don't silo things off. That's pretty key. One encounter takes place in a room adjacent to another counter, then try to think through like, well, what is the impact on that next encounter based on what happened here? The more you do that, the more the world feels like in a living environment, the more PCs or NPCs rather feel like they're like adjusting to what the PCs are doing. So the NPCs are being reactive, and that in turn will allow will empower the PCs to be more proactive because they'll just have to be out of necessity.
True. All right. I think that's going to bring us to the end of this episode of our side question episode. Make sure that you join us again next week when we get back to the main topic. But for this week, I've been your co-host for today, Matt.
And I am David.
Hey, let's leave it with a good night.